This is the TOMLOV 4K digital microscope. This is the Max version, which has the 10-inch screen. The regular TM4K version has an 8-inch screen. I was sent this to review for free. Currently it sells for $270. They haven't paid me for my review, and so my opinions remain my own. Okay, in the packaging, you get a relatively heavy iron or steel base here. It has an upright here that will go like that. It has this guy here, which will allow you to kind of move around and move in and out. There's also an up and down adjustment on this here. It has a very nice ring light here to provide light for the microscope. And then it has the microscope slash screen assembly itself. This guy here has the LEDs on and around the little microscope as well, but it comes with this guy that probably adds a lot more light. This guy here has USB, micro SD, and it has a little card in there. It might just be a blank, let's see. No, it is a 64 gigabyte micro SD card in there, and it goes in kind of upside down with the contacts facing up. HDMI, USB, 5-volt output. And so there is a plug here. It looks like an HDMI cable, a USB A to C cable, which is probably for powering this guy, and then another A to C cable, which might be for powering something else. This guy here is powered by a AC plug, so it's not that. Maybe there's an optional light you can get. And then it has a remote with a battery in it, a little battery protection strip, a couple of small accessories, some type of a cover that might snap somewhere, microfiber cleaning cloth, and so it also includes a manual here. Seems to be pretty involved. Seems to kind of tell you everything you really need to know there. Full color manual. I'm going to read the manual and put this thing together. To install this in the threaded hole, you have this plastic ring to put extra pressure on it. And so this guy spins around like that, and the flat side should be facing frontwards. And so if you cannot get it perfectly, so right here, the flat side's over there, you can back this out to get the flat side facing frontwards, and then you can twist the plastic ring, and by putting pressure on the plastic on the base with the twisting motion of the plastic ring, you can kind of lock it in place with this thing facing frontwards. So this guy goes up. So once you have the flat face to the front, this guy goes with this part sticking up. You might have to pull this out just a little bit, slide it down, and then tighten it up. All of these screws that tighten in have little plastic things on them, and so they grab with a piece of plastic, and so you can loosen this guy, move it up and down, and then tighten it in a position. There was just the tiniest bit of a light machine oil on the arm that moved back and forth, and so I got just a little bit of oil on my hand. Now when you put this guy in that ring, these two screws in the ring have to be above that red line, because between these two red lines is the focusing area, and that turns to focus. So you want to have that ring up in here. Now this can swivel all over the place. It can also fold back in place to get it kind of closer to the back. So at one place in the manual it says this stage is aluminum, but it is definitely steel. So there's two end of the microscope accessories included. There's kind of a light blocking shield and an ultraviolet blocking lens. And this appears to be a standard 1.25 inch optical lens, kind of like you'd have with a telescope eyepiece. So that guy can just screw on here, just like that, if you want to block ultraviolet light. I'm not sure if you're blocking ultraviolet light from getting into the camera, or if you're blocking the ultraviolet aspect of these little LEDs in here. So this little plastic piece, kind of, you turn it this way and it pops out. This reflector will shield the camera from the lights there, and there's two notches that these two little snaps go into. So you stick it in the notches and then you rotate slightly to the right, and that'll latch in place, and that'll keep these lights kind of shining light out to the outside of this thing, at which point it kind of diffuses in. And this little white plastic ring also goes on in the same way. It notches go in and then you turn it right, just a click, and it latches in place. And so in that case it keeps those lights from kind of shining into the camera. Now it's not installed by default, so I don't know if it's necessary in all situations. I'm going to leave it off for now, and we'll try and play around with it without them on there, and then if it gets to be glaring, I'll put it on later. On the back of the microscope unit, they have a 5-volt output USB-A port, a reset button, a power in charging port, and data transfer port, which is USB-C. There is the slot for a micro SD card. Mine came with a 64 gigabyte micro SD slot already populated in there. And then there's a mini HDMI port here to go out to a television. So they include a mini HDMI cable. They include two USB-A to C cables. My assumption here is that the short one would go from this 5-volt out port to like a light that might be mounted on this, and then the long one would go from the provided power adapter that's just, you know, kind of your AC wall power adapter here. It claims to have about a 1 to 2 hour runtime with a battery that's built in, and 2 to 3 hours to charge it up, and they say you should plug it in and charge it up before you use it. So the AC adapter that comes with it is universal input from 100 to 240 volts, 50-60 hertz. Its output is 5 volts at 2 amps. And so when I plug this guy in, it's turned off and it's just charging. Right now it's drawing 0.6 amps, so it's charging at about 3 watts. Now you could try plugging in to like a cell phone USB-C power delivery cable, but this device, as far as I can tell, does not negotiate USB-C power delivery, so it will not charge or operate from a USB-C power delivery device. It needs kind of a dumb 5-volt supply, and so just, you know, the USB-A to C cable that they provide with it will provide that, you know, just 5-volt always-on supply. So you can use the existing provided charger with it, but you may not be able to use a USB-C power delivery charger. Now when it's plugged in and charging, this light here turns red. So I've turned on the power. The light at the bottom's turned on. It's doing some things. If I had this in focus, you'd be able to see my hand. There's, you know, slightly in focus right there. There's skin on my hand. So right now when it's running, it goes up to a 0.8 amp supply, so it's drawing 4.25 watts. So it doesn't look like it really needs the full 2 amps, unless maybe it draws more power when it starts recording or something like that. So the total power put in was 3 watt hours, or 768 milliamps at 5 volts, and this light is no longer red. So I got this thing for 2 reasons. One is looking at electronics and soldering on electronics, and the other is model painting. So I have a small circuit board down here, and this 10-inch monitor makes it really nice and easy to see what you're looking at. If you need to zoom in more than the default power, you can do a digital zoom by pushing left and right. And it has a nice little overview window here that kind of says, hey, I want to look at, you know, this pin on that microchip. And then there's the pin right there. There's a focusing thing here, and I pretty much have it focused appropriately for this particular height of this circuit board. But if you bring the circuit board higher or lower, then it might go in and out of focus. Now, when you are sitting here, if the photograph icon is up there, you can just hit the OK button and it will capture a photo right there. And it seems to take a while, so I think there might be a delay before it captures, so it stops vibrating after you hit the OK button. There's also the remote control, so you can just push the photo button and it captures it, and that way you're not touching anything while you're sitting here and hitting the photo button. The advantage of the remote is you can immediately record a video, so I can hit the video recording, it switches to video recording mode, it's recording. I could do something on the circuit board, move it around, it's recorded the video, hit it again, and it stops recording. If you want to record from here, you have to long press the OK button to switch modes. And so you keep long pressing the OK button. There's a camera mode. You switch over to the video mode. When you're in the video mode, you can short press OK. It starts recording. You can record a video, push it again to turn off. I have the video set to 1080p by 60 Hertz. It actually can do 4K video. I actually turned that down just so the file sizes aren't so big. The pictures you can do by default 52 megapixel pictures, or you can change that to 13 megapixels if you don't need quite as much detail. So there's photo mode, there's video mode, and there's two other modes. So this is kind of the zoom in split screen mode. And basically it's kind of like a bigger version of the little display window here and then a zoomed in area. So you have half zoomed in and half overview. So this thing here says that's what's over there. Now they also have a mode which is a freeze mode, and there's different ways you can use this. So one way is you're looking at a quarter of the board, and every time you press OK, it pops it to a different part of the board. So you can say, hey, I want to compare this guy to that guy, and you're looking at the two guys. And so you can have up to 4 areas, 3 recorded solid, these 3, and then this one over here where you're actually looking. Now if you go into the menu and you move over to the settings and you go down to the freeze mode, the options there are 4, which is what you've seen. You have up, left, and full. And so when you're in full mode, it works just like this. If you push OK, it will freeze it. And so then it's just a frozen view. So that's probably most useful if you have a moving thing and you want to freeze it in motion at a certain spot. I think the 4-view mode is good if you're comparing multiple things to each other. And then either the left or the up view is useful if you're comparing 2 things. So in the left view, basically whatever you freeze goes to the left, and then you can look at something else and say, I want to compare, this guy to that guy, for example. The up and down view does the same thing. It's just, the top freezes and the bottom doesn't. But since it's a super wide display, I think the left to right looks a little better. And so anytime you hit OK, it basically takes that and copies it over, and then you can go and compare it to something else on the board. So those are the major features and functionality. In the menu, there's some extra things you can do. You can horizontally and vertically flip it. You can change the frequency for light rejection of the lights. You can have a lot of settings here for the size of the pixel, of the picture, size of the videos. There's an auto off, and so you could set it to turn off in a certain time. There's the language. There's also the date and time, so you can set a date and time. You can format the SD card, and there's also options for putting crosshairs and rulers and center markings on the video. I have most of those turned off, but you can have a line that shows or a crosshair or a ruler. Now obviously the ruler it's not a calibrated ruler, but it allows you to say, okay, well if I know that's 1 centimeter, then this is that same size. So it has all the basic features you would expect from a kind of digital microscope. I've been very happy with the image quality. The screen is good. I can see things very clearly. Now I'm using here just the default light bulbs and not any of the UV filters. Throw this UV filter on, but I don't think we're going to see a big difference here. So really with this UV filter, I'm just getting some of that light reflected back from the filter because these filters are behind, or the lights are behind the filter. So here's an example of kind of the crosshair ruler. Obviously these things, the units are meaningless because as you move up and down, the whole size changes. But you could say, well, this pad goes from 5 to 9, and then compare that to a different pad, for example. Now there's also a playback in the menu here, and so you can go back and view all of the past pictures and videos you've taken. You can also plug this into a computer and just download the files off a USB flash drive style setup, or you can take the micro SD card out of the back and plug that into a computer or some device that reads micro SD cards and read the files off of that. And to get back to microscope mode, you just go to microscope. Now, if you wanted to delete all of the files, you can go into playback and then go into menu, and there's a folder thing here which lets you do things like delete, and you can say, hey, I want to delete one or all of these. You can say, hey, delete all, and it will delete all the files. Now, if you feel this is too close, you can either lower the board down or use this guy in the back to raise the microscope up. Now, when you raise it up, you're going to change the focus, so you're going to have to refocus then again. So I have this raised all the way up, and the field of view down here is probably 1.5 inches wide. So I can get almost this entire board in the view there. Now, if you want to zoom in, you simply lower the microscope closer, or get the board closer to the microscope. And when you do that, you're changing the focus, so you're going to have to adjust the focus knob until you're happy with how focused it is. Now, for minifig painting, it definitely has enough zoom power to basically see what you're trying to see. One thing that it's not great at is it doesn't autofocus. So if you lift this guy up and you want to focus when he's up here, you're going to have to manually adjust this until the part of the figure you want in focus is in focus. So if you move it down, you're going to have to refocus again. So if you have it down like this, you're holding it down, and then you have a paintbrush you're coming in with, you could hit some of these small spots pretty easily. But it's not great for like handheld. It's better if you have it kind of, you're holding it against the base and you're aiming at a particular spot, and then you focus. If I want to work on the sword, I can focus on the sword in the hand. If I want to work here, I can adjust the focus to work on this dagger, for example. So it'd be perfectly fine for that, but it's not something you're just kind of holding up in the air and using. The Mini kind of has to be mostly fixed so it's not moving up and down and in and out of focus. But magnification wise, it's super easy to see what you're working on there. If you want to go farther out, you can lift this all the way up. So to give you an idea, kind of the maximum view here, this is a 25mm figure, and so you can pretty much get the whole thing in there. And, if you turned it sideways, you'd definitely be able to get the whole thing in. It's far enough away from the lights here that I might want a secondary light source or to install this larger ring light. So in the menu, there's the playback, and then there's kind of the palette. And it has two screens. So the last screen is horizontal mirror, vertical flip, and frequency. But if you keep going down, you'll come to the first screen, which has a lot of image adjustment ability. So right now it's set to auto exposure, and so a lot of these things are not available to use. You can change the contrast, the saturation, the sharpness. But if you change the auto exposure to have it locked exposure, you see it suddenly got dark. You can basically go down and adjust the exposure time and gain, and have it at a fixed setting. You can even change the white balance, so you can calibrate a white balance with a white piece of paper. There's lots of things you can do here. That's really only useful for people who need perfectly accurate color, maybe if they're taking a video or something. So in general, I've been pretty happy with this guy if you just set it to auto mode, and then it basically does a decent view of whatever you're looking at, perfectly fine for working on it. But if you are trying to take a picture or a video of something and you want the colors to be exactly right, so right here, the red there isn't quite as saturated as I think it should be. So if you were trying to do a very good picture and you wanted to, you can tweak the exposure and the color balance and things like that. So this is the ring light. It's not able to be powered via USB port off of the microscope. It does require a plug-in, and you can see here it has a adjustable brightness. And you can compare the little bit of light there cast by the LEDs built in. When I turn this guy up, you can see that that puts out a significant more amount of light there. And so if you're looking at something that's darker or you want more light on it, for a faster shutter, for example, this thing here can definitely help. I've personally found that the light coming out of the microscope here is enough for my purposes. But let's put this on and do some stuff that maybe takes a little bit brighter. So this microscope ring light feels like kind of an add-on that's not specifically for this microscope because it's so big around here. You can get these 3 screws to tighten it down onto the end there, but there's a super big gap, and you also have to be very precise to get it between the kind of the red ring in the bottom of this thing. So it fits on there, it holds okay, it certainly gets the light where it's supposed to be, and it definitely can increase the amount of light coming out, but it feels kind of like an extra accessory that they kind of threw in the box and bought from somewhere else. Now it does improve at least the color rendering of this image. I feel like that red there is more accurate with this on than with it off. Let me dial it down. So the auto gain adjustment works pretty well here. You can still see everything with the light that's included with the microscope, but with this added ring light, I think the contrast is a little better. The view might be just a little bit better. And obviously, if we go into the menu, so I've locked the exposure here and I've turned off the light, and you can see the sword and the boots because they're very reflective, but really you need that light turning on before you can see much else. So the ring light definitely boosts the light you can get out there. Not necessary in all situations, but still useful to have around. So one of the modes you can turn on is color, black and white, or negative. And the negative mode is sometimes useful for seeing fine details. Or if you're looking at a photographic negative, for example, this would show it in true color. When I get this circuit board up close to the microscope, I think the ring light's actually a little bright at full power, so you'll probably want to turn it down just a little bit to get something like that, which has better contrast in there for you. But it does have this nice easy knob, so you can adjust things and set it up where you think it works best. So I noticed when I put the UV filter over this thing, I was just getting reflections off of these lights, and I could not find a way to turn these lights off other than turning the whole power off to the whole thing. So I'm thinking maybe this little blocking light shield here is specifically if you want to put the UV filter on top here. So I'm going to try putting that blocking light shield onto this guy and then screwing that UV filter on and seeing if that keeps the UV filter from reflecting those lights back. It looks like it sends most of the light out to the edge here, and very little of it would go straight down, but we'll see how this works. Alright, I have the UV filter screwed onto the bottom here with the light blocking shield in there, and so we're not getting the hazy effects around the outside that we were getting without that light blocking shield, so I think that's making it work with this filter. It does look a little darker down here, so I think in this case if you're using that UV filter, you probably also want to have the ring light installed and turned on. And then you would have plenty of light there. So I think if you want to use the UV filter, you probably also definitely want to put in the light blocking thing and use the ring light in addition to that. Now I don't see a super large benefit with the UV blocking filter on the ring light, so I'm going to actually screw that off and we can compare before and after. So it doesn't look like the UV blocking filter is giving you any real benefit in this particular situation. Maybe if you had other lights illuminating it that had UV components, that might help. It does kind of protect the end of your microscope, so if you had liquid samples or something that you're getting really close to and you're worried about touching the actual lens, this provides an extra piece of glass between your microscope and whatever you're working with. But realistically, I don't think most people are going to be using the UV filter, and if you're not using the UV filter, there's no real reason to have this light blocking shield in either. So I think just leaving those off for most people is probably the appropriate choice. And then if you want extra light, you can add this guy on and really light things up. From a battery life perspective, I've been playing with this thing for probably an hour, and this thing hasn't even gone down a notch yet. I do kind of wish the ring light could be powered off of the USB port on the back. I realize it may not put out as much light if you were doing that, and it would also run down the battery faster, but just having it fully battery powered would be kind of a nice option. On the other hand, this guy is big enough and heavy enough that you're going to put it in a place on a desk and plug everything in and probably just leave it there permanently. I don't think this is something I mean, you certainly can pick it up and carry it around. It's not super heavy, but it's also more of something you leave at a workstation and just kind of set up your workstation and use it there. Something I learned reading the manual is you cannot turn it on with the remote control. You have to use the power button on the device here. But once it's on and running, it's listening for signals from the remote, and you can use it to take a picture or a video, use the menus, or push that power button. And I think you have to push and hold the power button, and then it will turn off with the remote if you wanted to do that. So here's an example with the ring light turned on, and I'm going to take a photo of that. And now I'm going to turn the ring light off. And so that's with the ring light turned off. Alright, so I tried plugging this Microscope into my computer with the USB-C to C cable, and nothing happened. It would not charge, it would not do data connectivity, even when the Microscope was turned on. Now, when I use the provided USB-A to C cable, it charges when it's turned off, and when it's turned on, it shows up as a 63 gigabyte volume, and you can just browse the volume and see the images on the micro SD card. So do make sure you use a USB-A to C cable when charging or connecting to your computer. I charge this guy all the way up, and I have the LCD brightness at 60%. I think 50% is the factory default, but I have the LCD brightness at 60% because that's what I like using. I have turned the auto off feature off, and I have it pointing at this clock. So on the display, we have a giant big timer, and I have the time-lapse camera watching. I've been very happy with this Microscope. It does everything I want it to do, has nice clear pictures. The ring light gives lots of light, and once you get it clamped on there, it stays on pretty darn well. I think the only real question here is the price, because it is a premium price point device, and it is a nice device, but I don't think it's like Swiss engineering super premium device. And you might be able to find something doing the similar thing at a lower price point. So you'll want to shop around and make sure that price point works for you. But functionality-wise, I'm very happy with it.